Hey, this is Jesse. Just letting everyone know that Zonan Canada is now available on SoundCloud, the iTunes Store, and Stitcher. Please consider following us on one of those platforms. Also, if you know anybody who might be interested in the show and isn't following it already, spreading the word to them can really help out at this point. This episode is going to be split into two segments. In the first part, Karl and I sit down to discuss some interesting developments in the world of streaming and geo-blocking. In the second part, Emily and I sit down with a very special guest, the one and only anime master from YTV. It all starts right now. So I got an interview, but before we get to that, there's a couple things I wanted to cover. Just tonight, we heard the announcement that there's a new Fruits Basket manga coming.
Yes, and an incredibly vague announcement that I think the original anime is running on Animax, but it's not clear that it's the original anime. So,
but it's Animax.
It's probably the original. Somebody on Twitter would have decoded the secret if there was a new Fruits Basket anime, but it's just one of those things where it's really could use an English press release right about. You've hopefully had one by the time this episode goes live.
Yeah, we'll see. This does remind me of a couple things. One, I still actually have not finished the original manga, and two, it also reminds me of that horrible article I wrote for Protoculture Addicts back in 2005, saying that Fruits Basket should air on YTV. Don't read it. Don't look for it, please. But I'm a little scared because Lance just said on Twitter today that I think he's going to start covering Protoculture Addicts on Anime Nostalgia Bomb. So,
can't wait to see that on Lance's site. It's going to be good times.
Yeah, it's all right. Anyway, a few things to cover. As you may remember from a couple episodes ago, we were talking about online streaming, and we were very proudly advocating the use of Hola, but apparently there are some issues with that. Karl?
It's a botnet, and they sell your bandwidth to DDoS other people, which means basically ruin other websites for money.
Take a step back. So, what is the whole issue? What is the whole deal with the free version of Hola?
The free version of Hola, the whole idea is that ideally, it should only be that you also act as an endpoint. So that if somebody, for some ridiculous reason, wants to watch Netflix Canada over in Netflix America, they can somebody in the States could make themselves look Canadian by using your internet. However, in practice, the way they actually make the free version make sense for them to operate is they turn around and sell your bandwidth to a distributed, service. And really what it means is they're selling your bandwidth to act as a DDoS, a distributed denial of service tool, which was used against various websites, including the notorious 8chan.
Yeah, the article that broke this news was oddly sympathetic towards 8chan, so I don't know. I'm not a tech person, so I'm still kind of skeptical about this, but Karl says it's a bad thing
It's an incredibly bad thing to do. It's put this way. You don't DDoS things. You don't do denial of service because it's a basic internet etiquette thing. You'd be like, I hate the crap that's coming out of your mouth, but I'm not going to punch you in the mouth for it because that's over the line. DDoS is the internet equivalent of assault, so you can't do it. It's not cool, even for jerks. If you don't like jerks, you deal with jerks the appropriate legal way, not by buying bandwidth from a company, unknowingly selling it from its customers. And in general, you don't run a DDoS, because the only way to do it is through fairly illegal means. Botnets that have been created through viruses, botnets that have been created through software that's supposed to be this great VPN deal, but is actually not. And unfortunately, the part that really sucks about this is we can't turn around and be like, hey, go on this other service, because they're... Yeah, that.
Is there an alternative? What can we do instead?
Have friends in America who will set you up a VPN, or spend about. Yeah, I think you can supposedly set up a VPN. It's about $3 a month for an actual VPN, and if you consider that you're already paying about $7 a month for Netflix, taking a slight surcharge on that is not the worst thing.
You pay for more useless things on a daily basis, I guess.
As we sit here sipping freaking Tim Hortons.
Yeah, the ritual. But anyway, because I'm an idiot, I still use Hola sometimes. Primarily...
You can't see me, but I'm visually pretending to slap Jesse right now.
Yeah. So, but here's the thing. One thing I was using it to test out the other day was Viewster. So, you may not be familiar with Viewster, mostly because they have done a terrible job of promoting their service here in North America. But Viewster is a UK-based streaming service that has been streaming a lot of anime content in the UK and internationally. Most of their stuff is available in Canada and the US, but a really interesting exception has come up in the last couple of weeks. Nia Under 7, a show that was once owned by Genion, or actually I think only Pioneer put it out.
Pioneer co-pro'd it, and I think Genion did do... Under the Genion years, there was a box set release, but it was one of these things that was one of the many Pioneer titles that didn't get any traction until way later. And then by the time it got traction, it was out of print.
But it's a neat show. It's actually a comedy, which is surprising considering it's from the team that brought us Serial Experiments Lain.
Well, okay, it's everybody from Lain except Chiaki Konaka, which is why they made a character making fun of Chiaki Konaka, who was a UFO addict. It was like they literally like, hey, the one person who didn't come back, we're going to make a character making fun of them on the show.
Yeah.
Which will really underline just how much of a comedy it is if they're like jabbing other staff members through characters.
She is the best character, though. Like,
no way. The incredibly stereotypical convenience store person who is an alien, but also for some reason, obviously a Punapasapima Petalon style, like, Indian. Like, it's ridiculous.
That was what was kind of funny about the show, was that it was supposed to be a commentary on Japan's policy when it comes to immigration.
Oh, it absolutely, it's 100%
but
a policy on Japan's immigration and xenophobia.
Yeah. But it winds
down to
up
like
being...
incredibly meta lines where it's all like, yeah, you can barely tell that these people are different, and it's like you're talking about Koreans. It's so bad.
It's still kind of weirdly racist, but in this, still in a well-meaning, obviously kind of misfired kind of way.
I think it's almost like it's a little too self-aware of it. I think it's like, it's not racist to be racist. It's using a racist stereotype to kind of underline just exactly how the cultural disconnect is there. I feel it doesn't always quite hit that mark, but I think that's really the intent.
Point is, Nia Under 7, good show, worth checking out, but if you're in Canada, you can't check it out. Because even though the title is available in the UK, it's available in Italy, it's available in Russia, it's available in Germany and a few other countries, but it's not in Canada, which is pretty weird. And I even tried it out with Hola. This is what I was trying to test. And even with Hola, you can't access it within Canada, which is kind of weird because you can even get Hulu using Hola. And Hulu was like the ultimate unbreachable streaming service for so long. Now this brings a few interesting issues, because of course Nia Under 7 was part of that whole Genion mess of licensing, so it's possible that it was just kind of, it's tied up in something that is going to be very difficult to untangle. It seems to me very unlikely, though, that the Canadian rights are inaccessible.
Yeah, no, I think there is just probably bad contracts written. There's probably this bad assumption that, like, hey, North America is... U.S. is also Canada. It's like, no, dog, that's separate.
Well, that's the whole thing, is because we have this history where the U.S. and Canada have been considered one territory, and now...
generic English-speaking North America.
Exactly. And we're making this transition now to where Canada is a separate territory from the United States, which we're seeing with, Hulu and a lot of the streaming weirdness, border weirdness that's going on, which is,
it's fine, we have Show Me.
We do. Yeah, I don't even have a retort for that.
No, well, mocking it is the retort.
Yeah.
And crazy.
Honestly, it is, like, for Canada to be a separate territory from the U.S. is actually, in many ways, good. But the idea of these two territories being the same is so intertwined that it almost seems like we can't transition away from it. Because on one hand, I mean, the home video market is still one territory for the U.S. and Canada.
Yeah, that's our Blu-ray, that's our DVD.
Yeah, and it seems impossible to move away from that mentality, and still, and over the years, I mean, Canadians have developed a kind of entitlement to get everything that the U.S. gets, which, honestly, that's been the whole basis of Zon in Canada from the beginning. And I don't think it's necessarily wrong, but
it seems really weird that we could move 140 miles away. Not even that, excuse me, that's all the way to Seattle. It seems weird that literally 40 miles away, you can be like, hey, now you can stream this show. Yeah. It's just it is very proprietary, and it's incredibly artificial. It's all this hangover and institutional momentum from the idea that these things have to be separate for separate countries, and when in fact the way the internet's set up is it would be vastly easier from a technical standpoint to just say everybody can stream this. Done.
Yeah. But the thing is that in this case, we don't really know what happened. But
we have no clue.
The speculation right now is that the Japanese licensor simply neglected to separate the U.S. and Canada and assumed that the U.S. rights were going to cover Canada.
Yeah.
Because that's traditionally how it's worked, and now we're kind of screwed over as a result. So if this is true, and, if it's not true, there's still other instances that sort of reinforce this idea. Does this make Canada unique when it comes to this kind of situation, especially when it comes to anime? If Canada is going to has become its own territory when it comes to streaming rights, is there still anything that sort of makes us special now that we can't argue that we're, tied to the U.S. territory the way that we used to be?
I think it makes us super special now, and
Yeah?
in a way that's incredibly problematic, because instead of it being like, oh yeah, this company has gotten rights to this show, and they're, it's a U.S. company, like, let's say Funimation or Crunchyroll runs into this, where Crunchyroll seems incredibly diligent, and so does Funimation, but let's just edge case, possibility. Because if Viewster can run into it, it's now within the realm of possibility that somebody gets the rights to the U.S. release for streaming, and then is completely, they missed Canada somehow, or saved like $1 or something, and then we don't have a legal way of streaming it. It's either gray market or straight piracy, and I think that's really bad, because Canada is small enough that you could see where it's going to get ignored. Just like kind of how we had this whole problem with DVD distribution forever and still kind of do. We could be in a real pickle here shortly if it's like, hey, I hope Show Me picks it up after the fact. Like, if we become dependent, like, on Show Me and Crave, that's going to be real. That's going to drive.
That is nightmare scenario right there.
Yeah, no, and like, and now it's like it's not like, haha, but that'd only be for like sitcoms. Well, one, that still sucks. Like, it still sucks to the idea that, like, hey, who might end up with Community Season 6 in Canada instead of Yahoo, the company that funded it and made it exist, would be Show Me or Crave. Like, that's screwed up. And the fact that's could be our new normal is unacceptable.
And especially with anime, I mean, there's the argument exists. This is something that we're probably going to talk about a little more in the next episode, is that in terms of percentages and proportion-wise, anime is arguably more popular in Canada than it is in the States.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's certainly an angle to that. I mean, I think in general, the millennial generation that's like us and younger, to a certain extent, all grew up with a lot of anime. And the result of that is, in general, it's popular with younger people. So I'm not sure whether by proportion or not, but there's enough, that's a large enough generation that you can't ignore it. It's the largest single generation, so in the US and Canada. So if you can't get anime, that's a huge, like, you are leaving money on the table. You are encouraging piracy. By encouraging piracy for one genre or medium, it begs piracy of other genres of medium, so it makes a lot more sense to just provide it legally and to have a framework wherein that's not a nightmare and a pain in the neck.
Yeah.
So dealing with third-tier garbage localized streaming services.
One other thing, really interesting announcement was made just this morning. My Anime List, which is the popular website where people make accounts and make lists of all the anime they've watched and how they rank them, which
King of Weebs, the website.
King of Weebs, the website. Who is the King of Weebs? They have teamed up with the Anime Consortium of Japan, who runs, of course, Daisuki, and Mal is going to start carrying Daisuki streams, which is honestly, probably the best strategic decision that this website has made in its entire existence, because now they're going to be reaching a built-in audience.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I just checked out my friend's favorite anime list, and here it is, the streams legally, immediately, with ads co-sold directly on it. I mean, the one thing that I hope comes out of it is I hope Crunchyroll and Funimation take a look at just how much of a threat this is, and immediately follow suit with, oh, we better also have our stuff there. I don't see any reason why that can't be a driving force for all of the major streaming services. And it isn't like that needs to be. Everybody needs to be there, because if everybody's there, again, it's this whole thing of just you never even bothered to look towards piracy in the first place. There's all the shows except from the under 7 because you didn't get licensing. And no, the one thing that actually will be really interesting out of the Mal thing is you will really see in action this aspect of. I think Daisuke, everything they've got is worldwide. But if anybody
worldwide except Japan and China.
Yeah.
So hopefully that will apply to Mal. Who knows? Like, we could wake up tomorrow and everything is like blocked in Canada for all we know.
Oh my lord!
Probably not going to happen. But
no. I mean, there's an aspect there of if you have on one hand some things that are showing up worldwide, and then for other titles, it's here's this nightmare list of, well, if you're Canada, click here. If you're in the States, click here. And if you're in the UK, click here. Like, that needs to be
more elegant.
Really, like I said, it's all a hangover. It's all this leftover idea that, as Lance said on a prior podcast, it's a hangover from syndication and from when it was really hard to scale and do these things in real time. Now there is just no reason for it to not be, here's this one company, they contract, it's available global, done. There's reason to have competing companies, but competing companies with global reach. There's no reason for, I work in a locality. I'm like, no, it's 2015, we're done.
But an interesting thing here is that in the fall, Daisuke is going to be streaming One Punch Man, which was a Viz license, which means that a Viz simulcast title is actually going to be available in Canada.
Finally,
yeah.
Maybe. You speak too soon,
I do,
Jesse.
Yeah, I know. Well, presumably this will be the case. Whether this means anything for other Viz titles is questionable, though. It's possible that Daisuke just got on this particular one because they wanted a piece of the pie. Yeah. I think when it comes to something like Sailor Moon, though, Viz is more likely going to see Daisuke as a competitor than as someone to broaden their reach with.
Yeah, no,
that's my guess.
Well, I think that goes with anybody in streaming, like everybody in home video, and I think that's why we've seen certain, notable people in the anime industry bail out of the home video lines into independent contracting and or direct work with streaming-based anime services. Is because
you're not talking about specific people at all.
No,
are you,
I'm not. All right. So the reason we see people like Adam and Sheehan and Lance Haskell bail, there is an aspect there of the next step is not being a regional licensor. That's done. That is like I said, it's like that worked and it helped anime explode in the U.S. and in North America kind of as a whole. Though, I mean, it also left money on the table and left fandom on the table in Canada in a big way. And that's done. Like, the new game is the show is running, day and date everywhere. Everybody's getting into it at the same time. Everybody's making money on it in that one shot. And then in additional shots, if it turns out to be hotter than they expect, then they can come back and loop back for additional merch. If they didn't plan for that, they can loop in on, some Blu-ray. And the physical releases can be staged. But the participatory release is a united thing. And arguably it has been for 15 years now because people have been streaming fan subs online that long. But now it's a global thing and you actually make money at it.
Well, how long will it take to bring all the parties in kicking and screaming? That's the big question.
It's just how long do they take for them to go out of business?
Oh.
No. I don't think that. I think the companies... I don't think we'll see things go out of business. I think we can see mergers, for sure. I think we can see some of these places, I had your set of streaming rights for this country and so on. Like, I think a lot of the people who Funimation partner with internationally, I think honestly, like, you could say, just make that one company that can actually compete against Crunchyroll as a international company, because the idea that you're just working in a region, again, done.
So anyway, I think we should get on to this interview now. So Emily Gonzalez and I, we interviewed YTV's anime master, Martin Su. The interview was actually conducted a couple weeks ago, June 28th. I apologize for the delay. It's been a pretty crazy couple weeks here. So I should provide a little bit of context for this particular interview. The anime master interview is probably going to be significant for a couple of particular types of audiences. One audience is going to be the people who were probably a little younger than me during the anime boom. You may recognize the anime master from the old kids interactive website yabber.net, and as well as ytv.com, where the anime master not only wrote articles but also conducted a number of chats and unique types of engagement with the younger audience at the time. If this was the sort of time period, early 2000s anime boom, where you entered the world of online fandom at a young age, there's a very good chance that Anime Master played a role in it. In Canada. So you'll probably get something out of this interview for sure. The other audience is probably going to be those trolls who hang out on YTV's Facebook page and constantly harass them for not catering to their childhood memories. I just want to let you know that YTV is not obligated to serve you or fit your ideals of a youth broadcaster, because you don't know what kids like. I'm sorry.
Kids want to watch old Gundam.
Yeah, definitely. Just to let you guys know, YTV is different. They're serving an audience. You're not part of that audience, and you clearly don't understand that audience. So please, if you're listening to this podcast for that reason, please get a life. I mean, I got a life, so I'm sure you can too.
Wrecked.
So, back in the 1990s and 2000s, YTV aired a number of anime shows, including Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball, Pokemon, Gundam Wing, and a few years later, the Bionics block, which I'm sure most of the people listening to this show remember. Martin Su is an anime fan and researcher who works at YTV, and he's joining us today to look back on the impact anime had on the media landscape at that time. Now, if you followed YTV's website and anime promotional materials over the years, you may know him as the Anime Master. Martin, say hello.
Hi, it's great to be here.
We're very happy to have you on today, Martin. I really appreciate you coming up. Martin is a regular at Anime North a lot of the time, so you may have met him there, whether you realized it or not. And he's, again, still continues to be a very prominent presence at YTV and on their website. So, how's everyone doing? Have you guys been watching anything interesting?
Well, for me, I just decided to take a look a little bit more of Toriko. It's an anime I've been curious about. So, and also the way, like, I've seen clips of the specials where it had a crossover with One Piece and Dragon Ball Z. But I just want to see how different it is, see how, and compare it to other shonen series like Dragon Ball, One Piece. But I personally found it very fascinating,
Yeah, they were really pushing it hard as sort of like the new Dragon Ball or the one of the new Bleaches or Narutos or One Pieces, despite having a really weird premise. What about you, Emily? What have you been up to? What have you been watching?
So I haven't been watching a lot of anime. Obviously, I'm because I do a lot of stuff with Moonchase. I'm watching Sailor Moon Crystal.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really been watching too much of the Viz redub. I got the first part of the first season on Blu-ray, and I've been watching it here and there. I've also been checking out some stuff on Netflix, so things like Attack on Titan and Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. And then in more mainstream kind of stuff, I'm keeping up with things like Game of Thrones, a lot of the Marvel and DC shows that are coming out now. Like one of my favorites is Agent Carter, which I heard got renewed for next year. And then another thing for more Canadian type of thing, I'm really into Orphan Black right now. So I'm watching a variety of things.
Still only one episode into Orphan Black. I really got to get on that. I feel unpatriotic by not keeping up with it.
You got to join the Clone Club.
I know. I think the only show I've been living and breathing lately has been Steven Universe. I love it. It has to be the best show that Cartoon Network has ever produced. Anime-wise, I recently finished Parasite. It was okay. I mean, I think the ending was okay on that one. I had heard a lot of great things about it, but I think a lot of aspects of that show haven't really aged very well since it's based on an older comic. But it has pretty good animation. Music's kind of terrible. Execution's not always perfect, but it's an enjoyable watch. I recommend it. I've also been rewatching Gundam Seed with my girlfriend because she had never seen it. It was kind of funny because we're still early in the show, and then she suddenly recalled seeing bits and pieces of it on YTV, and she was like, I remember there was one character in this show I really didn't like. And I'm just like, well, I guess maybe we'll find out who that is very soon.
The one that everybody dislikes?
Hey now.
Oh, I still remember the reaction from the very last episode of Gundam Seed, Well, I remember my friend's reactions when we first aired that episode on YTV, so...
So, Martin, can you just kind of briefly explain to us what exactly your job at YTV is?
Yeah, I'll be glad to. I'm the senior research analyst for Course Entertainment Kids Specialty Services. So that includes networks such as YTV, Teletoon, Treehouse, Nickelodeon, Teletoon Retro, Cartoon Network, and coming this September, we'll be airing the Disney Channel. Essentially, my primary job is I analyze the ratings data, and then I send all my reports to various departments, where those reports are used to keep track and evaluate our programming objectives and strategies.
It may actually surprise a lot of people to hear that you don't actually really work in a PR capacity with the company at all. You're purely in the sort of data crunching, hardlined ratings analyzing sort of area.
I just look at the numbers,
Well, yeah, you just look at the numbers, but I would imagine that it's probably one of the most sobering jobs you can have in television, because you know how the shows are really performing.
Yeah. Well, it's something I tell a lot of people, that a number is essentially useless unless you have something to compare it to, And so the way I look at the numbers, I can see all kinds of stories that come from that. So if people would ask me how this is doing, I can easily tell them the results.
Okay, so the way you look at it, it's not entirely quantitative. You see kind of a narrative in the way all this plays out.
Well, actually, it's not. Well, usually when I give out my reports, it's not just like a quantitative basis. I give a meaning to the numbers, but sometimes I apply some qualitative statements as well, things that I've seen, like how we presented on the network. So it's not just the numbers. I sometimes discuss in detail about the content itself. So it's not just the numbers. I see reactions from fans from other sources. So it's, even though I use the quantitative as the basis, it creates a foundation and the proof of my explanation. Because usually when people usually make a recommendation, you need the numbers to back up your claim. It's like if you're trying to apply for a business loan, you need to have a business plan, and in the business plan, you need to show the numbers on how everything works.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a marketing angle to it as well.
In some ways. Actually, I do have a marketing degree as well.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that's sort of what your basis is in. You're very attuned to various fandoms, including anime fandom and different cartoon fandom. Do you find that differs from more general audiences?
There are certain degrees of how passionate certain types of fandoms are. So it's just from my own personal experiences. Like, I sometimes see how one group of fans are more passionate than others, But like I said, in my job, it's the numbers just speak for themselves, So I look at all different kinds of things, not just the numbers. I do additional research outside of that. A lot of my research is based on the numbers, but sometimes I add some additional text beyond that, some qualitative statements to go along with that.
So you are a fan yourself. Did you watch YTV as a kid? Any particular shows that you liked or stuck with you?
Well, actually, when YTV first came out, when it first came into existence, I was in grade 12 at the time. But actually, I did watch anime before YTV's launch. Mm-hmm. So, for example, in the 70s, there was Star Blazers or Space Battleship Yamato on WTV. Global, they had Battle of the Planets. And TVO, they had Fables of the Green Forest and Tales of Magic. But when we got into the 80s, we had more titles. So, I remember Global, they had Astro Boy. CH11 Ontario, they had Thunderbirds 2086. Omni, which, well, actually, it was called CFMT at the time, but they used
I don't think it was Omni back in the 80s.
Yeah. They used to. I remember when they first aired Voltron. There was Force 5, Tekkaman, and actually one of the breakthrough animes in the 80s when WTV showed Robotech. But actually, when in YTV's earliest years, so some of the anime that they aired that included Saber Rider and the Star Sharers and Samurai Pizza Cats. But YTV also aired the Vancouver dubbed Dragon Ball in the early years as well.
Yeah, that was a few years later in about 95, 96. And yeah, that one definitely, Dragon Ball definitely stuck a lot more here because it was an early example of a show that was just kind of floundering around in syndication, but was able to, grab a firmer national audience in Canada. And I know a lot of the shows you mentioned before, they were local broadcasts in Toronto. But, I guess apart from Battle of the Planets on Global, which I guess would have aired in global stations around the country. But then YTV just sort of marked that with Saber Rider, that was like one of the big examples of a show that was airing in specific markets, but on YTV it sort of took on this new context as something airing nationally that the whole country could watch at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when did you start working at YTV? What shows were running on there at the time?
Well, actually, I started working with Chorus in August of 2000. So that means by August this year, I'll be with the company for 15 years. But at that time, when I got started there, YTV already started airing a number of anime, such as Pokemon, Digimon, Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, and Monster Rancher. And so when I got started, Pokemon was the dominant anime force at the time. My debut year, it took place near the end of the Pokemon Orange Island episodes and around the start of the Johto Saga. And so in the fall season of my debut year, that's when YTV started adding in Gundam Wing, Vision of Escaflowne, and Teletoon. They started airing Card Captors.
Yeah, that was definitely an interesting season because we saw, Escaflowne was, kind of prospering in a prime time slot, and then we had the Gundam Wing thing in the evening, and then it wasn't really taking off too much on Teletoon, but they had picked up Card Captors through Nelvana, I suppose.
Well, let's not forget that when Teletoon got started in the very first year, they also aired Dragon Ball Z, the first 13 episodes.
Yes, I think they were the first Canadian broadcaster to run it, but they ran it at like 11:30 at night, and it was just those first 13 episodes over and over again.
Yeah, and there were also a couple of anime movies, like Ninja Scroll, Wings of Hanaemes, and MadQuest Plus.
Yeah. Also, I know that, again, Teletoon was running DBZ over and over. It did show up on YTV shortly after that, but if I recall correctly, even YTV only at first ran the show at like 1 a.m., just sort of as a replacement for the old Dragon Ball, which was running at 1 a.m. for a while, and it didn't actually make the move back to weekdays or weekday afternoon time slots until it had sort of hit in the U.S.
Well, actually, during a time when I got started on YTV, Dragon Ball was also airing somewhere along, I think it was probably on the Saturday mornings as well.
Oh, okay.
Because around the time when Pokemon was very dominant, at the time we were also airing other series like on Saturday morning, not just Pokemon, but I remember YTV airing like Digimon and Dragon Ball Z on Saturday mornings. But at some point, all those shows also found a way on weekday afternoons. So, for example, Pokemon, they made their debut like on a Sunday morning, but at some point later on, they started airing 5 days a week on the Zone on the weekday afternoons. And sure enough, Dragon Ball Z and Digimon also followed as well.
But regardless of whether these shows were being geared from a U.S. perspective or a Canadian perspective, there was still this sort of general frenzy going on in the early 2000s when the anime fad. Mm-hmm. Was like, it seemed the anime as a fad was just starting to grow at that time, and it was during that time that Martin's moniker as the anime master started to appear in places at YTV. Martin, what like how did that really happen? How did you become known as the anime master?
Well, during the early years of my course career, YTV had a sister website at the time called Yabanet. So our interactive department, they knew about my knowledge of anime at the time, and so they approached me to ask me if I was interested in doing a Stump the Anime Master web chat for the test. So I agreed, and the first test was so successful that Interactive decided to create a special series of 6 weekly Stump the Anime Master chats that summer. And so the Stump the Anime Master website event, well, that was also very well received in Yabanet. Actually, it earned me a Samurai Award for initiative. And the Samurai Award, that's usually given to employees for putting courses values into action. Actually, even though the Yabanet website ceased to exist at the time, what happened is that they decided to transfer some of the popular activities and transfer that to the YTV website. So during the majority of the 2000 decade, I was able to contribute articles which helped to promote anime conventions, also to encourage fans to look at and appreciate anime in various ways. And there's also feature interviews with voice actors. So at that time, I interviewed over 60 voice actors, but a lot of credit for the existence of the Anime Master goes to my friend Jennifer Krebs.
How often did the anime master get stumped?
Well, on average, I'd say a range would go from 3 to 5 on per chat.
Oh, okay. You were still fighting to hold that title as anime master.
Well, but one of the things I was hoping what the web chats I had done for our fans is that it encouraged them to look at more about the animes that they love. Find out new information that they've never seen before on it. It also gives them a chance, to know what else Japan has, or oh, here's something that's coming up that Japan is airing. It's for example, I remember in the Yu-Gi-Oh chat, at the time when we got started, at that time when we started airing Yu-Gi-Oh, I already learned about the existence of the Egyptian god cards.
So, do you think that Canadian kids were getting kind of a taste of something that a lot of U.S. viewers wouldn't get, or people in different countries wouldn't get, or different Western countries, I guess?
I think so, because, usually, I guess this is one of those rare moments where we create an opportunity for young anime viewers to have a chance to talk with somebody who knows a lot about it, And this gives me a chance, to create some inspiration. So there's so much out there, and what you see out there, that's just the tip of the iceberg, So I'm hoping that the chats create a huge impact, create a better appreciation for the anime that we show, but also to encourage that, everybody has the potential to become an anime master as well, knowing that there's so much to see and appreciate. So I don't try to I'm not here to say I'm the best, but I just want to say I've studied a lot of it, but I just want to use that opportunity to, share that with fans as well.
Did you have fun, sort of representing anime for the station? I know you still write some pieces as anime master on the website today.
Well, actually, it was definitely a lot of fun, and having another identity, it had its advantages too. So, for example, when I go to conventions, I could be anonymous. I can interact with the attendees very naturally. So, in the early years, around the time when Fan Expo was called CN Anime, during one of those years, I was in the waiting line for Brian Drummond's autograph. And so the person beside me was asking me if I knew about the Anime Master Chat. And he was saying he knew he had some questions he figured that would stump him. That person never realized who he was talking to this whole time.
Well, yeah.
So
how would he? What you're a stealthy ninja, so I guess that makes sense. It's cool that YTV actually kind of has somebody to sort of cover conventions. Do any Canadian TV networks ever really send anyone to cons? I know, I'm out in Vancouver, so obviously.
Well, actually,
Space,
I
don't see them, but
Space has a huge presence at Fan Expo, and they've been doing that for a few years. They had been going there, kind of, having a booth there for a while, and then suddenly they decided to become a sponsor, and they started advertising Fan Expo on their station, and that's when the attendance skyrocketed. And the first year this happened, they were really unprepared for the massive jump in the crowd. And then the next year, you thought they would be a little bit more prepared, but there's also when you're booking the space, you're because of how far in advance they were booking the space, they actually couldn't have booked a bigger space at the time. So it took a little while to work it out so that they would have enough space for the amount of people who want to go. And now they've actually expanded to the point that they have taken over the entire convention center.
It's kind of funny how like media consolidation has brought like so many eyeballs and so much attention to like brands like Space, and yet they never seem to be ready to be sort of face their audience in like a convention context or anything like that.
Well, actually, I found Space has gotten pretty good at it. Kind of depends on the year. I think it's taken a little bit of time for them to kind of figure out, what the best way is to approach it. I know there was a few years ago that AJ had actually ended up moderating one of the panels with a guest, and it's one of those intermittent interaction kind of sessions, and it ended up being a little bit too much like we were watching an interview on TV, because he ended up doing most of the questions, and so a lot of people in the audience couldn't really ask questions. And I think a lot of people were kind of disappointed about that. And that was the kind of thing that kind of stuck in my mind when I went to go and do moderation at Unplugged Expo last year, because I'd heard that, also before that fans wanted to make sure that they had the chance to ask their own questions, right? Because they don't get to see these people very often. And a media rep can always go and have a private interview, but the general fan who's just come there to see that person, they don't have another opportunity to go and talk to that person. So I tried to really make sure that everybody had a chance.
Oh, actually what Emily said about the voice actors, I try to do the same thing too. So whenever I have interviews with the voice actors, I always try to make sure it's very entertaining for the audiences. So I always ask the very different questions, but all the voice actors who have interviews with me, they always find fun and entertaining, but I will never ask them how they got started in the voice acting. I will never ask them.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Martin, did you have any thoughts on like just sort of TV station representation at cons? I mean, I think you seem to do a pretty good job of shouldering that yourself.
Well, actually, a couple of years ago, Omni TV was at Anime North, and they also had a documentary on their station. They aired it a couple of times in the year at the time. I remember a friend of mine was actually in that documentary. So in that documentary, they see like what their lifestyles are like at home, and then what happens when they're at the conventions. It's mostly the cosplay, so they show like what their lives are like outside of the convention, and then what happens like when they're in the convention, when they're in the masquerade. So it's really quite fascinating, like how you see other stations who try to do coverage as well.
Yeah, for sure. Seeing other stations just sort of wrap their head around this whole kind of thing.
Yeah, and interesting thing. Well, here's an interesting little thing based on the numbers that I got from Anime North at one time. So the year after YTV aired live at Anime North, well, the very next year, the attendance for Anime North increased by 60%.
Which year was that?
It was around, we aired live around 2003. So in 2004, the attendance increased by 60%.
That's also the year that Inuyasha premiered on YTV. Was it not?
It was somewhere around there, but
yeah,
but it just shows, but it also proves that when you have the right media presence, it shows a lot of people what is out there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you had it covered both in terms of the actual content and that engagement with the fan base and the culture surrounding the content as well, which is pretty good.
Yeah, I think like at Fan Expo, we do actually see some other TV stations will have a presence there. Like CTV has had a booth there before. CBC has been bringing in some people, but none of them really go and promote the convention on their station so much. Space does, because they're a sponsor and they'd been there for a while, and I think they really saw that, like, this is basically everything we air, so let's appeal to these people. But yeah, definitely when something becomes that visible to the right kind of people who are going to be interested in it, it has a huge effect. Because I don't think that conventions generally are easy for people to find out about unless you hear it from a friend. If it's on a major television station that there's promotion for it, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I had no idea this thing existed. And then it becomes more mainstream.
Canadian representation amongst industry and conventions is something I've always found a little lacking. I think, again, going back to what I said before, I think a lot of it has to do with sort of media consolidation and the fact that everything kind of comes back to the broadcaster in Canada a lot of the time, and they don't always have the best approach to dealing with things like fandom and conventions, and it's definitely barren for that kind of thing over here in Vancouver. Even though some of our conventions, I think, seem to get more anime distributor representation than you see in Toronto sometimes.
Yeah.
But Toronto seems to that's sort of the broadcasting epicenter of Canada. So it's a little different over there.
Yeah, we get a little bit more of the broadcaster presence, and there, the industry presence has been very minimal. You might get, like one or two companies that might come, and then you don't see them for a while, and it's a little disappointing because you end up hearing a lot about things that different companies are doing in the States, and they're appearing at all these different conventions all over the country, and then they don't really seem to come to conventions in Canada. And the bigger conventions that we have here are basically in Toronto or Vancouver. And we don't end up seeing a lot of industry presence here. And I think that's a little bit unfortunate for the fan base.
Well, to be fair, I haven't seen an interesting Funimation panel in about 5 years. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, there's a balance there, right? Yeah. So, like, if the whole panel is basically just, okay, we're advertising these series that are coming up, then that's not as interesting. And yeah, you could just go to their website and find out what series are coming up.
Here's a trailer. Please applaud.
Yeah. I think it's good for industry to go and see what the fandom is into.
Yep. Well, that's the neat thing about the conventions, and like I said, it becomes very handy for me because that way I can see what the people are into as well. That's one of the things that helped me in figuring out, what kinds of anime we used to get during the years of Bionics. Mm-hmm. Of course, that's just one of the parts. I still examine the storylines as well, just to be sure.
Yeah. Yeah, but you can tell the popularity of something, right?
Yeah.
Because if everybody is dressing up as Attack on Titan characters, that show is popular.
But like I said, I have to check the storyline as well because, like, even though like a certain show may be very popular, I still got to make sure it fits certain requirements of YTV. Because it can't. It's got to make sure like it fits a certain age group as well. So. Yeah,
you don't want to be.
So, Martin, what are your personal favorite anime series that have run on YTV over the years?
Well, let's see. Samurai Pizza Cats for starters. It's a good example where the rewritten scripts surpass the original dialogues, in my opinion. But Sailor Moon, that was also a huge moment for me. Did
you have a particular favorite series of Sailor Moon, like the original RS?
I guess I sort of like the way things were written, like in the first season of Sailor Moon, mostly because of some of the dialogue that was written, But I also think about all the dialogue that Terry Hawks did as well,
Martin, did you ever watch Princess Tutu?
I've heard the series myself, but I've never watched it personally.
Because it's kind of neat because that one is directed by Junichi Sato, who directed the first season of Sailor Moon, whereas Ikuhara took over from R onwards, and Ikuhara went on to do Utena. So So it's kind of neat because Princess Tutu and Utena both kind of represent where those creative minds sort of branched off to later. Sorry, that was a total tangent, but I was just curious.
Yeah, but yeah, well, I mean, Sailor Moon was definitely a huge one because I remember that even in the TV Guide on Toronto Star, they had an article talking about Sailor Moon and its impact on female audiences. But actually,
they actually like had specific info on that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I remember the TV Guide article. That, and there were like some random claims that they made that didn't actually make any sense. So it was like they had read like a synopsis of what the series was supposed to be about, but didn't actually watch it.
Well,
that's TV Guide journalism for you, I guess.
Oh my god! I just had a strange flashback. It was on CBC when they had Jonovision, and I remember there was one episode where they talked about Sailor Moon. So it just shows how far Sailor Moon's popularity went. Yeah, but but I gotta tell you, one of my most passionate anime series that on YTV, it's Yu-Gi-Oh, and for me it's a little different story because I learned about Yu-Gi-Oh a year before it ever came to North America. And once I heard plans were being made for Yu-Gi-Oh! To come to North America, that's when I started gathering the qualitative and quantitative research on the series, and that's when I recommended that YTV should air that series.
How did they pick it up very long after it started on the 4Kids block? Or sorry, was it on Kids WB? I can't remember.
At that time, Yu-Gi-Oh! In the U.S. it was on the Kids WB block.
Yeah.
But all I did is like I just found the article that had the initial ratings, and I just presented it to the ratings group. But I also supplied additional information like what it does in Japan and how far the popularity went. Like I remember I told them about an article I read about a time when there was a riot in Japan due to Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. Well, actually, according to the article, what happened is there was supposed to be a release of some new Yu-Gi-Oh cards at the stadium, but what happened is that the people who were running the event, they underestimated the number of people that were coming, and a lot of these people came like hundreds of miles to come to get these cards. So according to the article, a last-minute decision was made not to sell the cards.
A lot of fans, they like draw sort of this barrier between shows that are targeted to older audiences and usually the more localized shows that are more targeted to kids. You seem to have a really balanced perspective on both of them. Do you feel that like the more localized kid shows get hated on too much for various reasons, or do you think things get the amount of love that they should? Do you think do you think some fans have the wrong kind of perspective on this kind of thing?
Well, actually, there's no definite answer to that question. I mean, if somebody doesn't like a kid show, maybe because, that series is not in the target audience range for that person itself. What I usually look at that's more fascinating for me to see, it's usually see the fan base that a series can build and how far it can grow. It's like, for example, like in the world of anime, it's been interesting for me to see the world of anime from the perspective of fans, the anime companies, the voice actors, and the TV stations at the same time. With those perspectives, I gained a deeper understanding on how everything works. From that experience, I've always learned that in order to become a better fan, one has to learn to observe from different perspectives and understand the world from all aspects.
Some people hate on these more younger skewing shows a lot of the time, but I mean it's important to have them on there because how else are kids gonna? It's so troubling to know that some kids like go on Google to look up info on a show they love just to see a bunch of like bitter adults hating on it for being too localized or something like that.
Yeah, but like I said, we just got to look at it from different perspectives.
Yeah. Have you had an experience where you've had to watch a show that you really love performing badly and the ratings are getting like I can imagine that would be a really traumatizing experience if you're really connected to a show, or like does it feel conflicting, or have you just become used to that kind of thing?
Well, yeah, it can be disappointing at times, but you know what, these things happen. Sometimes like especially like if there isn't like a strong enough audience for the series, but sometimes this can be an advantage at the same time because if you can cancel one series, at least that gives you an opportunity to introduce the audience to something else, that entertains things in a different way. It's, for me, I know the business. I know the business behind it. So it's like if I see the ratings for it on Patch, it's like, yeah, I understand. But like I said, there's so many things that can happen to a show. But for me, I try to look at things rationally. I try to keep things professional. But like I said, whether the show goes on or not, that's not my decision.
So just even as a fan, you don't find it too hard to sort of remove yourself from that perspective when you're dealing with it in a sort of a professional context.
Well, like I said, I again, if I hear like something's going to get canceled, again, I try to as a fan. As a better fan, I try to look at things from different perspectives. Sometimes if something gets canceled, I try to look at the reasons behind that. Of course, I won't have like all the answers, but it's like I share the understanding for that. It's like I may not agree with it necessarily, but I do understand.
So, do you feel that anime fandom in Canada is really unique from what we see in other countries, like Asian countries or even the United States? And if so, do you think there's any reason for that?
Well, I remember that during my trips to Taiwan, I was fortunate to find like a lot of large anime merchandise sources in Taipei, and a lot of that merchandise goes to One Piece. It's very popular there. Like if you go,
not here. It's kind of.
No, I mean, if you go to that one store, you see all different kinds of One Piece merchandise. Like if you're a One Piece fan, it's gonna be One Piece heaven. But for the Canadian fandom, well, let's take a look at Sailor Moon on a side note. So as you know, all the original voice work was done for Sailor Moon, and that was all done in Toronto. And we've seen how well Sailor Moon did on YTV on various time slots. So as a result, the fandom for the series rose in Canada more quickly in the U.S. And at that time, the U.S. put in very odd like late night or early morning time slots.
Yeah, well, it was only airing in specific markets. It didn't air nationally there till USA Network got it, I think.
There are some differences here and there between Canada and the U.S., but I think it just shows that sometimes if something is made in Canada, I think it shows it's how it's treated. May show how it's treated a little bit differently in Canada in a way.
It's too bad Pretty Cure couldn't hit quite the same way though. Yeah.
But again, like I said, there's all kind of factors.
Yeah.
That determines like how well a series is going to do. I've seen attempts at some series and then they just get canceled because like some people say, oh, this series is a clone of this one, or it just doesn't appeal to it, or it's just presented in the wrong way.
Yeah, going back to One Piece, it's so sad that show just can't gain traction in the U.S. or Canada, no matter what. I think it's still going on Toonami in the States, but it has like the latest time slot, and it regularly scores several 100,000 viewers lower than Naruto Shippuden does, which is kind of sad because with Naruto Shippuden you have like an entire arc where like you have these characters running through a freaking hallway, and yet One Piece you have a more interesting arc running at the same time, and yet it can't. People just don't seem to want to spend time with those characters. That's always kind of distressing for me. And actually, Toonami even ran it earlier for a little while. They ran it at 8:30 as a follow up to DBZ Kai, and it still didn't take. It just tanked.
Well, with One Piece, it's hard to say with One Piece. It's personally, I think it's a different case because sometimes, because there's just so many episodes of One Piece out there, sometimes it's very difficult to absorb everything, So, or for all we know, it's because there just might be other ways to look at One Piece, there's a simulcast, there's the wikis, you can see like the synopsis of the latest chapters. People can go up to the manga, which is like ahead of the anime, but there's maybe so much to absorb at the time, where some series may be easier to get into the story,
So, Martin, you were fortunate to be at YTV when a number of really great anime shows were running on the station. Are there any shows that did not show up on the station either during the Bionics period or after that you really wish could have shown up, but for whatever reason couldn't? And ship has sailed, the hype has died down on the show. There's really no chance we'll ever see it on TV again because the opportunity's gone.
Well, actually, all of the shows that I hope would appear on YTV did appear, and they all delivered great audiences. But Naruto Shippuden was probably the one series, that didn't air. But keep in mind that, by that time the schedule was already shifting already,
Yeah.
So, everything like that I personally hope that I figured would be a would generate great audiences. Everything that I suggested, it did work out.
Actually, I was gonna. What about FMA Brotherhood? I know that one went to Super Channel, or is that what they call it, Canadian Television Purgatory?
Now it's on Netflix.
It is on Netflix. Actually, I think they're still missing the last few episodes, but
It all depends on timing. But like I said, I'm glad with I'm just glad with everything, with all the anime that we aired and the impact it had.
So just going back to cons, as a frequent con goer in the Toronto area, can you talk a bit about the connections between broadcast and the popularity and importance of conventions for Canadian anime fandom?
Well, the neat thing about attending conventions, it creates a good opportunity to see like what new programs are trending and which ones like are trending and also exciting to the fans. So like for example, like there was that one year where Naruto was in demand, and there was the other year we had Bleach, and then the next year we had Death Note. But conventions are definitely a good way to see what is influenced people. It gives us a chance to see what characters are dressing up as, or what types of merchandise they purchase. But I think the best thing about the conventions, it's one of the best ways to bring people together that are passionate about a genre together. And like for example, when it comes to being an anime nerd, you could talk to various people and you can see how passionate they are. But I think the other neat thing is that when it comes to conventions, your audience, and sometimes one of the things I've learned is like, if you know where your audience is, if you give them the message, they will deliver it for you. Actually, it sort of reminds me about that time where I was able to do the announcement about YTV airing The Legend of Korra a few years ago.
Yeah, that was notable because they wound up airing it very close to the premiere in the States rather than waiting until the fall.
Oh, but you just seen what the reaction was like
Yeah.
when he made the announcement at the opening and closing ceremonies at Anime North. One of my friends who was in the actual audience, well, first of all, after the loud yelling and applause, she was telling me that she noticed a lot of people were going straight to the phones and telling people all about that. And I also remember seeing a lot of people mentioning about that on Tumblr as well. But
Yeah, of course.
it just shows. But it just shows that conventions are definitely a good way to communicate to your fans. It's like what you see like at San Diego Comic-Con. When you see all those huge panels for upcoming shows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if only Korra could have maintained that frenzy. Well, I guess it did a little bit, but I think after season 2, it seemed to kind of fizzle out a little bit with a lot of people. The whole thing did air on Canadian TV, though, right?
We've in different ways, whether it's
Yeah.
on air or on the websites.
Wasn't Nickelodeon Canada going to air 3 and 4?
We already did that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, cool.
Yeah, but we showed it in different ways. So like I said, we aired it on air, but also we've also aired episodes online as well.
Do you think that that there's going to be any more kinds of announcements like that in the future? Like, is that something that YTV is looking at announcing like a select number of shows?
If well, let me do it this way. If we were to do this at Anime North, it really depends on what shows and how it connects with the audience.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, if it was up to me, if we wanted to, like I said, it all depends on the connection.
Mm-hmm. I also remember when you had announced that Legend of Korra, you had mentioned that some of the fan reaction afterwards was a little bit strange for you because you're normally very low key at conventions. Nobody really knows who you are, and then suddenly you were very visible. And you had mentioned that someone even came and asked you for an autograph. What was it like for you to suddenly transition between being, like almost like a fan, just a fan who was there, to being somebody who was really representing YTV there visibly?
For me, I found it a little awkward because like somebody asked me to autograph his shirt because like well, why me? I'm not a voice actor.
That does sound kind of awkward.
It's like why me? It's like I'm not a voice actor. I'm not an industry specialist. So I just found that a little peculiar. It's like I'm just not anybody famous. It's like I just want to help to spread the word for the fans.
So Martin, before we finish off, any shows that we should be keeping an eye on in the future?
I'm not asking. Sorry, just to clarify, I'm not asking if there's anything coming to YTV that hasn't been announced. I'm asking just shows out there that might be localized soon that you think the fandom here should be paying attention to. From what I've seen, I think the only thing we should keep an eye on is the revival on classic series that we appreciate. But think about this: we've had Sailor Moon Crystal, we've had Star Blazers 2199, we've got Dragon Ball Super coming later on. Next year, there's going to be a new Yu-Gi-Oh movie based on the original Yu-Gi-Oh characters. So, for all we know, a lot of the classic anime that we love, I mean, like even Digimon's going to have a revival series as well. So, I think it just shows that I think people realize like a lot of anime that we love, and I guess they're still going to try to find ways to create revisions on that. I think that's one thing that might be interesting to observe,
And Battle of the Planets, of course.
Oh yes, Battle of the Planets. Oh yes, with the new Battle of the Planets from Novana. Yes.
Yeah.
So, but it just shows that there's so much out there to see.
Okay, well, Martin, Emily, thanks a bunch for coming on today. It was great.
Thanks for having us.
It was great being here.
Well, hope you enjoyed Zonan Canada. Big thanks to the Anime Master for revealing his identity for us today. You can find Emily at moon-chase.com. Do not forget the hyphen. You can find Karl's music, including the music that you heard on the show today, at ultraclystron.com. If you want to contact me, I'm on Twitter at Zonan Canada, or you can use the contact form at zonan.ca. If you know anybody who might be interested in the show, please recommend it. Follow us on iTunes and Stitcher and SoundCloud if you can. Thanks a lot. See you again.